this source sheet has taken me on quite the loop. I thought I will be ambitious and talk about the First Commandment because we're going to be reading that soon. And once you start looking and discussing and reading and studying about God and the philosophy behind it, you go down many, many different rabbit holes and many different threads and tangents, and you're never going to finish. So we're going to start today. And there's lots of different texts, but I imagine we may not get through all of them because I have a feeling we're going to end up talking quite a bit and discussing about our various different conceptions of what that means. So without further ado, just a reminder again, next week, Reverend Sam Zworenstein will be teaching about Parshat Naso, which is next week. I have the week off. No, I'm just kidding. I have to go to a meeting at my son's school. He's already been caught with... I was just kidding. Caught him in, around back with the... Anna, it's your kid's influence on my kids. It must be. Anyway, let's study Torah. Where are we here? Okay, here we go.
Hey, everyone.
How's everybody doing today? All right, good. So, you can see up here all these different windows that are open. So when we're reading about, I thought we could do a little bit about the history of Shavuot and whatever and why it's so important. But I'm going to be doing that for the UPJ Tikkun Leil tomorrow night. I forgot what time my slot is. I'm going to be pre-recording that. So that's about half an hour or so. Be another text. So if you're interested in that and you're okay to be online on Yom Tov, that I'm sure they're going to provide a recording of that as well. And if you don't, I'll be making my own recording. If you want to hear that, by all means, I'll happily share that. But we're talking about the Ten Commandments. Now, first of all, in Hebrew, how do you say the Ten Commandments?
Aseret HaDibrot.
Aseret HaDibrot. Now, those of you who speak a little bit of Hebrew, what does that actually mean?
The 10 utterances.
Exactly right. 10 utterances. It's not 10 commandments, because if it was 10 commandments, what would that be?
Rules.
Aseret HaMitzvot.
Rules.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But specifically in our tradition, it doesn't call it that. So, and also you have various different ways that the commandments are broken up. And they're over the course of several different verses. When you're reading them to study, the musical notes, the intonations are different. When you're reading them to read to the community, they are a different set, right? It's the Te'amim ha'elyonim, the upper ones, and when you're studying them, it's Te'amim ha'tachtonim, the lower notes, and they split it up differently. So when you're reading it to read to the community, which we'll do if we would have been in shul, would be on Saturday on Friday morning, and also when we read it at the two different times of the Torah in Shemot and in Devarim, in Exodus and Deuteronomy. The musical notes divide the commandments into 10 verses. Some of them are much longer, right? Some of them are much longer. Some of them are shorter. But one of the ways we know, or at least the rabbis think they know, that this is the first commandment is because the musical notes tell us so. Okay? So if you look here, you can see that what I'm talking about. See, it has, those of you, if anybody here have any background with reading Torah?
I'm learning right now.
You're learning right now. See, so you have here the Pashta, Munach, Zakev Katon, or you have Tipcha, Munach et Nachta, which normally you wouldn't have both of those on one word. You just wouldn't. And also here, it looks like it's a Sof Pasuk, but it also, there's a Mercha et Nachta. Right? Merchat Tipcha Munach. So it's like, well, what's going on? So that's getting a little bit too detailed. Suffice it to say, there are two different ways that these verses in the 10 Commandments or the 10 utterances can be divided. All we're going to do today is look at this one verse, which we have heard so many different times in so many different places, right? Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. Now, and there's different ways to translate this, right? You've probably heard this in TV shows. I am the Lord your God, right?
Yeah.
One of my favorite ones is anybody watch West Wing here?
Who?
Right? Tim, you know what I'm talking about? The pilot episode?
Never.
Because here is, that's the fourth commandment. What's the first commandment? And the president opens the door. The first time you see the president, the pilot, I am the Lord your God. And it's just like, the president, he's the Lord your God. It's great, right? But in the new JPS translation, I am the Lord your God who have brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. Okay? So, if we are saying that this is the 10 commandments, someone please, first of all, define for me, what is a commandment?
It's a law, isn't it? It's supposed to.
It's a positive.
It comes from the word command, right? So
it's an order given by somebody.
Order given by someone, exactly.
And it controls behavior.
Right. Well, it's very simply, it's a command, something that you must do, right? You must do. I remember my time in the military, Saif, right? You're in the military too. When your commanding officer tells you, hey, I'd like you to whatever, is he giving you a suggestion of something to do, or
You're going to do it.
you're going to do it, or you're going to be sorry if you don't do it, right? Right? Like when my captain used to tell me, hey, it'd be nice if you did a service on Friday night. Was he suggesting that I do a service on Friday nights?
That's a commandment.
That's a command. You will do that. And roger that, sir, right? They can be polite about it sometimes, but they're still orders. So if that's what it is, so please someone enlighten me from the simple reading here. This is the first commandment. What exactly are we being commanded to do? And if you don't know, that's okay, because we are going to go through and try and figure out what that commandment is. And if you're also not sure, you're in excellent company, because rabbis have been struggling with this for thousands of years. But Tim, you had your hand up.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Joan.
Why is it I'm the Lord your God who have? Is this just what I just don't understand the why have and not has? I know it's a
Because it's I have,
Yeah, so read it, sorry.
has.
I have done something.
I have. That's sorry. I don't know where my brain was. Okay.
So if you read it like that,
Yes.
I have brought you out of the land of Egypt, makes sense, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not the way it is, but that is kind of,
Yes.
that's the implication.
Yes. No.
Therefore, if you read it like this, I am the Lord your God, who have brought, so that makes sense if you read it that way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I was just reading it wrong. It's okay.
No. You're not reading it wrong. You're reading it in I want to be absolutely clear, and I really, it's too late now, but I really should have gone through and put all the different alternative translations of this verse, because there are many, many different versions of what we think it means. Okay.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah, the translations here says out of the house of slavery, but slavery is abdud, out of the house of slaves.
Correct.
That has a very concrete connotation, as though they were housed in a special place for slaves. How is that?
Well, the connotation here would be from the house, from the beit. It's not literally a house; it's the place of slavery. Like we say beit tefillah or beit rofi, beit arsu. What's the word? It connotes a place of, not a specific place, but an area or that time or where you came from. Okay.
That's right.
Anna, you had a question?
No, just put it Mitzrayim.
I don't have a question. I have an interpretation.
Oh, go for it.
Well, the first commandment is it's all about whether or not you believe in God. So if you don't believe in God, then you can't get past the first commandment.
Aha.
And so what sort of influences that is this idea that God saved us in a way. And so we should trust in God for bringing us out of Egypt from slavery to freedom.
So it is
Like a contract.
Yeah. So this sets the baseline. So you can't have the second commandment without the first commandment.
right. Oh, got a little loud there for a second.
So better.
That's much better.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was trying new headphones, but clearly that's not a good idea.
This shows the power of. Sorry, who was talking? Because I couldn't see your face. I'm so sorry.
That was Tim, I believe.
Oh, it was me, Tim.
Sorry, Tim.
Hello.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. I'm not sure. Did everyone hear everything now?
No.
Oh, okay. So what I said was you can't have the second commandment without the first commandment. So the first commandment establishes the relationship between God and Israel.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking at it's a declarative or a preamble sort of thing, right? Good. Okay.
It's also a statement of monotheism. Like I am the
Statement of monotheism. Yeah.
It's to
Well, that sort of gets into the second one, which is
no
you
idol.
shall have no other gods before me.
Yeah.
It's a.
And by the way, that's the way the Christians read it.
Yeah.
You shall have that. That's their second, or it doesn't matter. We're not getting into the Christian interpretation of stuff right now.
I think it's asserting some kind of power because God is the giver, you know, the agency for our freedom.
Okay. Saif?
So I agree with Tim in the way that this is setting the scene for what's going to come, because unless you know that you've got, again, back to the military sort of setup, unless you know where you are in the ranking and where this order is coming from, you won't be able to then understand that this is important and this is a commandment. So I think that's sort of a setup to be able to then have commandments. It's not a commandment per se, but it's more of, this is where I am, and therefore you're going to listen to the things I'm going to tell you.
So it's in a way saying, I'm able to tell you these things or command you to do these things because this is how I am vested, right? So I would always get from that letter from my commanding officer, you know, John Smith, Captain USS whatever, or commanding officer Marine Base Quantico or whatever, right? Now that I know who this person is, now I know that I have to listen to them. Is that what you're saying, Saif?
That's what I'm saying. Exactly that's what I'm saying.
Right? That actually would be very much in keeping with documents that we know from roughly contemporary to this time period in this area, treaties and things written so on so forth, right? I've conquered you, now I'm going to put this thing down and I'm going to say, I am the king of whatever, who has conquered you in this war of whatever, and now here are the terms of the treaty that you will obey because I am the one who you have, right? And so there are some interpretations that say that's exactly what's going on here. That this is not a commandment, this is simply saying, I am the God who brought you out of Egypt, therefore I have the authority to command you to do the following 9 things. Okay, that is one of the interpretations also. So let's see what the rabbis and commentators think about this, okay? Because you will see that there is a huge variety of opinions on this, not surprisingly, when we're talking about our interpretation of God, all right? So Crescas, he's a Spanish Jewish philosopher from the 14th century, give or take. He says the following: he who includes a list of positive precepts, commandments, believes in the positive precept belief in the existence of God, falls into a common error. The very character of the term mitzvah indicates by definition that it can only apply to matters governed by free will and choice. But faith in the existence of God is one of those things which are not governed by free will and choice. Consequently, the term mitzvah cannot apply to it, right? This
But
is neither...
we just said that a commandment, you had no choice. You have to do it.
Sorry, you can choose not to follow those orders or that command, and then bad things will happen.
Yeah.
You're going to accept, right? You're going to accept the consequences if you don't do what you're supposed to do, such as court-martial in the military, or a long time ago flogging or summary execution or whatever. Same thing here in the Bible. We have a list of things that will and won't happen to you.
But
Right?
that's not
All
really
code,
free
right?
choice. That's not free choice.
What is free choice? You have a choice not to follow those laws.
Yeah, but you've got something hanging over your head if you don't.
Well, let me ask you a question, Shira. The law here is, let me see, not to jaywalk. Have you ever jaywalked before?
Yes, sure.
Well, that's a free choice, right? You have chosen willfully, and by the way, I'll remind you, this is being recorded. So,
But the consequences are not very severe.
well, now you're talking about a matter of degrees, but the point is, fundamentally, you do have free choice. You can choose not to follow the law of jaywalking, and it's simply a matter of degrees. And this would be a different question of the philosophy of law is, do we do things because they're right, or not do things because we're afraid of the punishment? And that's a totally different question that we're not going to discuss right now. But the fundamental idea is, therefore, it shouldn't make a difference if you are agreeing to follow the rules of jaywalking or not to murder someone, right? The consequence on one side of that argument should make no difference. Right? Either you do follow the law and you've chosen to, or you don't. Or there is the choice that you make based on what those consequences might be. But his point is, a command, it has to be something that you have free will and choice. And here, that's not what this is. It's a declarative. It's a preamble, right? Which is very much what Saif was saying, and I forgot who else was saying. This is the opening statement to why we have these following utterances that are coming up afterwards.
Why does he say that faith in the existence of God is not governed by free will?
Aha. Why does he say that? Because he is of the opinion that we have that. That's the starting point. Kind of, I think, Tim, what you were saying, right? That is the starting point of this whole exercise is I have faith and I believe in the existence of God.
And that's not the Rambam, isn't it?
No. This is Kreska. Yeah. This is a different guy.
Yeah, but Rambam.
We're going to come to Rambam. Don't worry. We got a lot of Rambam coming up, I promise. Right? So exciting. Right? So he's saying, this guy is saying, it's the introduction to, okay? Abarbanel, who is an Italian commentator, he says some of the same thing. The phrase, I am the Lord your God, constitutes no commandment, either dogmatic or practical, but is merely a preface to the subsequent commandments and injunctions, a declaration making known to the children of Israel who was addressing them. Right? Very, very similar to Kreskas, slightly different, but just giving you two different flavors. That is one area of commentary. Now, we're going to move away from that thread only because it's somewhat of a dead end. Because if you say that it's not a commandment, well, then okay, cool. It's not a commandment, it's an introduction to, and there's not a lot of depth more to plumb out of that. We're going to look quite a bit now into those commentators who say it is a commandment, but what exactly is the commandment commanding us to do? Okay, so here we go. Sefer HaMitzvot La Rambam. So this is one of Rambam's books of his earlier book of commandments, not to be confused with the Mishnah Torah, which comes later. So here he's saying, based on this verse, the first mitzvah, Hi hatzivui asher tzavanu b'hamonat ha'elohot, right? That the first mitzvah is that he commanded us to believe in the deity. That is, we believe that there is a cause and motive force behind all existing thing. This idea is expressed in the statement, I am the Lord your God. Okay? And we believe that there is a God. That's what he says is the command. Yeah. Now, what's very interesting is what comes, he wrote the Mishnah Torah a little bit later. He says later on, mitzvah rishona, mitzvot aseh, that it's a positive commandment, right? So you understand that there's two different kinds of commandments. There's mitzvot aseh, to do something, and mitzvot al ta'aseh, or lo ta'aseh, things that you shouldn't do, right? So remember Shabbat, do that. Don't kill somebody, or don't murder somebody, excuse me, don't do that. Okay, then those are how the commandments are split up. He's saying not only is this a commandment, he's being even more specific. This is a positive commandment. You have to do this. You have to believe in a God. Okay, but what's really interesting here, because he writes this later, it's not Shenea behamunat or Shenea amin. Here he's saying Leda. All of a sudden, instead of to believe, it's to know. Right? So what's the difference? first of all, how can the same guy separated by a little bit change his mind? Because I think you'd agree with me, there's a big, vast gulf of difference between believing something and knowing something. So it's fascinating that I mean, it's a different code. It's the same author. He changes from saying to believe to know. And that's Rambam, the same guy. All right. So he writes also in a separate place in the Mishnah Torah, in the foundation of the Torah, it constitutes the most fundamental of fundamentals and pillar of all sciences to know that there is a first cause bringing into existence all existing things, and that all that exists on heaven and earth and between them exists only through the truth of God's existence. The knowledge of this matter is a positive commandment, as it says, I am the Lord your God. And anyone who brings upon his mind that there may be another God beside him violates a negative commandment, as it says, you shall not have other gods before me, which is the second commandment. And this thought is complete heresy. For this knowledge of God is the greatest principle upon which everything else depends. So that's, Tim, what you were saying, right? But it's slightly different, because he's saying that this is a commandment. It's not a preamble, it's a commandment. However, it is the first commandment, and anything that comes after it depends on this one commandment. So it's related to what you said, Tim, but it's a little different, because his starting point is this is a commandment. Anna, you have a question or a comment, or you're going to disagree with me?
There's a lot of this that I can unpack and that I agree and disagree with.
Okay.
But just what I find interesting is this idea that to know that there is a first cause. So I always have issues around creation theory of this idea of the first cause, what's it called?
Creation ex nihilo.
Yes. That the idea that how can something come out of nothing?
Yeah.
That's all.
Okay. Anybody else want to comment?
Just ask, when he's going from belief to knowledge,
Yes.
so he's becoming stricter and more extreme. That's my interpretation, because if you know something, it's at a higher level than, because belief
Right.
is
You have a certainty.
faith.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a certainty behind what I think I know.
Yeah. So how could he just state that?
Because he's Rambam.
I know, but he made things very exclusive and difficult, like with his 13 principles of faith. Like if you didn't hold them, then you're not a true member of the faith, is what he was saying.
He would say, and by the way, when he wrote that, he was scoffed at by a lot of other scholars, of Jewish scholars at the time. Because for us, a belief was, I mean, kind of bluntly, like, I don't really care what you believe. I care what you do.
Yes.
Right? All throughout the Bible, there's not much of any mention whatsoever of belief.
No.
Right? We don't talk about that.
No.
We were not a religion of dogmas or
No.
that nature. That's not what we
Well,
are.
I've always felt uncomfortable with Rambam. I don't.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of issues with Rambam. I mean, but also where he comes up with that in these two places. The problem, a big problem with Rambam, is that he didn't cite his sources. So we're not really clear where he came up with that concept. Now, he's a big follower of Aristotle, and so there's a lot of overlap, and he brings a lot of that philosophy in. And later on, we're going to talk a little bit about the Guide to the Perplexed, where he talks a little bit about that, which is his philosophical work, not his. Because interesting, this is in the book of halakha, of law, not philosophy.
No.
Okay. Lisa, was that a question or a comment?
I was just thinking that you were saying about the difference between doing versus believing, and it sort of comes back to what you're saying earlier about your motivation. I mean, it's one thing to do the right thing because you're told you have to do it and you'll be punished if you don't, and making a choice that way. It's another to do it because you believe it's the right thing to do. You know?
Yes. So in a way, it's sort of it removes any of that doubt, right?
It's kind of the difference between morals and ethics, though. You know, like morals is based on a belief of what is right, and ethics is how you behave. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with the statement, but
No,
Very.
I'm not asking anyone to agree or disagree. I just want to make sure we
Yeah.
understand what he's saying. Whether you agree or not, you form your own opinion of God, or at least what we think this commandment is saying, if it is indeed a commandment. Okay, good. Yes, Saif.
I just have one thing about the Rambam in terms of changing from believing to knowing. And I wonder whether there's some influences from the era and the location of where he lived and where he studied and where he moved. Because if you ask a Jew, are you a Jew? The answer is not always straightforward, yes or no. Whereas if you ask a Catholic or a Muslim, the answer is very firm, is a yes or a no. And I'm not sure whether there's sort of time difference between the believing phase and then the knowing phase, and whether there's an influence from, one of the other faiths into that there is definitely a God, that, as opposed to, as a Jew, you question, is there, isn't, or what level, or, you don't just accept
and this is a newish thing, because being a Jew was, my parents are Jewish, I'm Jewish. And it wasn't religion in the sense that we understand it, of belief in a faith. It was the people who I'm a part of. That's what being a Jew was about, and I would argue still is about. But be that as it may, it's the concept, the idea, for many generations, for hundreds of years, was nothing about a religion. It was about the nation you belong to. And part of belonging to that nation was this relationship that we have with the Almighty. It wasn't about belief. That's what it was. It's in that only when you have the beginning of the influence of Christianity and later on Islam, that puts a lot of stock in faith and belief. We can't help but absorb some of those ideas because we're living amongst those societies. So just like we took on a lot of other practices and thoughts and ideas from those religions, based on practices relating to how we worship or how we dress or how we eat or whatever, of course we're going to take on some of the aspects of belief as well. Of course, that's, as we say, barur. Of course, that's going to happen. Anyway, let's move on. I don't want to get too. I mean, we could keep unpacking Rambam, but there's, like I said, there's like, let's see, there's lots and lots and lots and lots. Whoa. Sorry, what did I do there? Okay, so if you ever wondered where this concept of 613 comes from, because by the way, it's not mentioned at all, ever in the Torah, never. Okay. It's not mentioned in the Midrash until much later. It's not mentioned in the Mishnah. This is one of the first times the number 613 comes up. Okay? One of the first times it comes up. So there is Drash Rabbi Simlai. There is Rabbi Simlai taught, he gave a drash. Okay? There were 613 mitzvot stated to Moses in the Torah. Okay? And this is from a Midrash, consisting of 365 prohibitions. And this is, and I didn't give you the whole sugya here. Sugya means a section of Talmud. They go from 613 different numbers all the way down to 1. Okay, I'm only giving you part of it here. But here he's saying there are 613 corresponding to 365 negative commandments, or al ta'aseh, which corresponds to 365 days of the year, which is interesting because we Jews, we have 354 days in our Jewish calendar, not 365, but okay. And 248 positive mitzvot corresponding to the number of a person's limbs. Now, doctor, how many bones do we have in our body?
211 or something like that?
Yeah, not 248. But don't worry, this is rabbinic anatomy. It's okay, trust me.
I can give you a little bit more of more interesting anatomy, just as a sideline. But I came across this recently. I've been studying anatomy for, I don't know, over 15 years. We've got one bone in the humerus, and then 2 bones, radius and ulna, and then 3 bones in the first carpal row, 4 bones in the second carpal row, and then 5 bones. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 5 fingers.
That is very cool. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. I mean, I knew that, but I never paid attention.
Unless you're born without fingers, but anyway.
Who needs fingers? They're overrated.
You can make them.
That's really cool. I didn't know that. So he's saying this is one way that we came up to 613. Okay. So Rav Hamnuna said, what is the verse that alludes to this? It is written, Moses commanded to us the Torah and inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. Okay? And I'm sure you've heard that verse before, right? Torah tziva lanu Moshe, morasha kilat Yaakov, right? So what does that mean? And now you're going to have some rabbinic magic here, which is gematria. Anybody know what gematria is?
I know the term.
The numerology.
Yeah.
It's what?
Numerology.
Numerology, exactly right. If you ever, in numerology, it's not the most convincing of proofs, but okay. So the value of the word Torah in numerical value, is 611, right? Taf, right? You see here, Taf is 400, Vav is 6, that's 406. Resh is 200, that is, 606, and 5, presto, 611. Oh, wait. We said 613. What happened? Hang on a minute, that doesn't work. Wait. 611. And furthermore, the number of mitzvot that were received and taught by Moses, our teacher. Okay? Moses taught us 611. So where those other two come from? I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods. The first two of the 10 commandments that we heard from the mouth of the Almighty, for a total of 613.
Beautiful.
Clear as mud.
This is magic stuff.
Right? Gematria, listen, you can do a lot of stuff with gematria, and you can do a lot of stuff that you just like. This is one of those where you're like, what? Okay, we'll go with that. This is definitely one of these where it's like, yes, we're going to get to 613 because I already have the answer. Now I have to make up the question.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
But, okay, I mean, there's a few different ways that they get to 613. This is one of them, okay? This is one of them. You might have heard the other one, tzitzit, right? That I think it's Rashi says, right? The word tzitzit, that equals, so tzadi is 90, yud is 10, tzadi is another 90, yud is 10, and then taf is 400, so that's 600. And then you take the value of 8 strings and 5 knots, 13. Presto, 613. The problem with that is that's not how you spell tzitzit. Tzitzit only has 1 yud, not 2. But that's okay. So, I mean, they do all, they get to 613 a couple different ways. But this is one of the ways that we come up to 613. But the important thing here is, for our purposes, that even in the Gemara, they are saying that I am the Lord your God is a commandment. Right? It is a commandment. And it's unique in that of all the other ones, it was relayed, the 611 were relayed to Moses and then told us. The first two, I am the Lord your God and you shall have no other gods, those were told by God directly to us. Okay? Directly to us. And it's interesting because if you look, it's speaking, it's all in the singular. Anochi Adonai Elohecha. You, singular. I'm speaking to every single one of you as an individual. Even though you're all standing together, you as an individual. Because really, if I'm speaking to a whole group of you, I would say, Anochi Adonai Elohechem. I am your plural God, not you, your singular. But we didn't write it that way. And that's one of the things they say here, is that God was talking to you directly. Okay, oops, here. So, that's just that verse there. So here, in the Guide to the Perplexed, he further comments a little bit on this. Rambam, again. They mean that these words, the first two commandments, reached them just as they reached Moses, our teacher. But it was not Moses who transmitted it to them, right? They heard it by themselves. For these two principles, I mean the existence and unity of God, are knowable by human speculation alone. Now, with regard to everything that can be known by demonstration, the status of the prophet and that of everything else is equal. The Torah states, until you, it was known, it was shown. So here again, we're back to, you have to, they're by speculation alone, right? By belief, not by knowing. So Rambam, make up your mind, please.
Well, he's combining both words. Knowable
Right, he's trying
by belief.
Or it could be saying that noble by belief, possibly.
But I don't
Right.
think speculation is belief. Speculation is projection.
That's right.
I think it's
Theorizing.
I think it's an advance on belief.
Really? An
Yeah.
advance on belief. Speculate is not to be sure. You're sort of proposing something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hypothesizing
Hypothesis, yes.
and using another cognitive function, a quite different cognitive function from belief.
That's right. That's true.
Okay. Yes, that does definitely have the connotation that it's not a faith-based thing. You're using your intellect to speculate towards something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll buy that. I'd buy that. Wow, we're striking the time. So Malbim, he's now commenting on why Rambam changed, and he's also trying to harmonize that original objection from Kreskas that this is not a commandment. Okay, let's see how he does, because that's an interesting thing to try and put together. So in his code, Rambam deliberately changed the wording from believe to know. He wished to stress the intellectual basis of the precept. This, as he pointed out in the guide, is based on the rabbinic dictum that we heard the first two commandments of the Decalogue directly from God, implying purely intellectual apprehension. In other words, the whole of Judaism, apart from these two precepts, is based on faith. Faith in Moses as a messenger of God, faith that all he commanded constituted the authentic message of God. But these two commandments, the existence and oneness of the divinity, is attained by the direct experience of men's intellectual faculties. Right? The Lord implanted these concepts in him from birth. They are innate ideas. A man has only to look into his own soul to discover them, just as he develops all the rest of his faculties. There was no need to receive them from Moses in act of faith. They were therefore imparted directly by God who fashioned man's soul. The precept consists of making every effort to clarify our knowledge of this in accordance with the text from Job, who cannot fail to discover that the hand of the Lord is behind all of this. Right? Now, by the way, I apologize for the gendered language here, but I'm directly quoting from Malbim.
It's a real problem, Rafi.
Yes.
This really sets up for failure in a way, for what is to come of God and all of God's doing in the Bible, in the Torah. I'll leave it at that.
Well,
I could unpack this as well, but I won't.
No. Listen, it does.
This is idea of perfection, some kind of perfection here. That anyway, I'm not going to get into it.
No, there is.
For example, let's say homosexuality was an abomination according to the Torah.
Oh yeah, no,
And I think that with somehow there's an implantation of God within me, and so therefore I have to follow all of that. That the Torah is, what is truth within the Torah, and so I have to follow that because.
So hold on, so I'll stop because what he's saying here is the truth.
Yeah.
Is and the thing that we know directly from God that was implanted in us is that we believe in God and there is no other gods besides that. Everything else was transmitted from Moses to us. Okay, those two things were directly given to us by God, and that's not a faith thing. That's fact. That's how we know it, and it's a commandment. Therefore, okay. So there's those other things. That all that he commanded, so then if you deal with that, you're talking about this part here, that all faith that all he commanded comes to the authentic message of God, right? That's what you're twigged to, Anna? Yeah, that's going to give you some, that's going to cause some problems. No problem, Anita. I wish you the best. Chag Sameach as well. When you need to leave, you let me know. But thank you for coming to join us. We're going to go for another 15 minutes max. Okay?
Thank you. Chag Sameach, everybody. Thank you.
Anita.
So you're absolutely right that that causes some issues, because it makes it seem that, and that's a fairly consistent message, is that the Bible is perfect and we can't question any of it. It's only very relatively recently that we're like, well, it's not actually relatively recently. The rabbis have been doing it a lot. We just call it different things. But the midrash and the interpretation and the commentary of what the rabbis say when they're changing what the clear text of the text is saying, they do that a lot, all the time, right? Like where it says an eye for an eye, right? The rabbis come and they say, no, it doesn't actually mean to poke somebody's eye out. It means you pay the financial restitution of what the eye was worth. Well, that's a very nice interpretation, but that's clearly not what that's saying, right? But we don't question that. That's okay. The rabbis reinterpreted that. But when we say things like, you're right, like homosexuality, for example, well, why can't we? And that's a whole can of worms that, maybe we should get into a different time. But again, what I want to stop this line of questioning only because it's taking us in a direction that I don't really want to go right now. Extremely fascinating question. But I was focusing on this part, not that part. The Lord implanted these concepts in him from birth, right? Mm-hmm. So Anna, I have a feeling I'm going to get a long list of questions from you, which is fine. Anybody's welcome to do that. I'm happy to. But in the 15 minutes I have left, I want to try and proceed a little bit from the concept of the commandment form of it, not the faith and message of Moses, the messenger of God, and all that's concept, the authentic message of God. Really a lot to unpack on that. Also, let's hold off on that, okay, and stay focused if it's at all possible. Okay, so you can see here why he's trying to harmonize Rambam and Kreskas. I'm not convinced he did it very successfully, but it's a noble attempt, right? That it is saying, yeah, it is both an introduction and preamble, but it also is a commandment, and it's stating a fact that is just immutable, that God and God gave us those facts directly implanted into our soul, and we just have to find and see that, and it develops like with the rest of our faculties. Okay, that's what he's attempting to say there. You may know this from the Aleinu. So, and he's also trying to make sure we understand a distinction here, that you have something like this. This is a formulation of a principle. This is from the Aleinu, right? Right? That's a statement of a principle. This in the Torah, in the First Commandment, is different. It's not quite that. It's not quite that. Now, this is really quite a long text here, and it's actually quite interesting. But we're not going to go through all of it. But this is Ibn Ezra at the one verse before this, and what he's talking about here, Ibn Ezra. He's having a conversation with Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, okay, and it's talking about the question of what that's from the Kuzari, right? And he's saying, the Khazar, the king of Khazar said, faith which, echoing the opening words, we believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who brought forth the children of Israel. Okay, that's the question. How can you believe in that? And he starts to Ibn Ezra tries to answer that question for him. I might do is just in the interest of time, kind of summarize it for you. And he's saying, giving lots of different proofs, but it's interesting that he doesn't give us what the answer of Yehuda Halevi actually was, which is a summary here. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is from a philosopher, a commentator, who summarizes basically what Yehuda Halevi's answers from the Kuzari is. All other medieval authors, in presenting Judaism, pass from the general to the particular. They dwell first on the justification of faith in God and consider hereby to have proved the justification of religion as a contact with God and as a belief in historical revelation. Okay? But Halevi does not start with natural phenomenon and from there proceed to the Creator. He doesn't do that. The fact of revelation, recognized in ancient times and in their own days, is the proof of the belief in God. Whereas the attribution of organic wonders to a cosmic intelligence is firstly less convincing and acceptable, and secondly only leads to a God of metaphysics and not to a God of religion who is concerned for the individual and expects a definite reaction from him. Someone just sighed. Was that in like, yes?
That was
Meryl,
me.
you?
That was Lisa.
Oh, Lisa, why did you sigh like that?
Because the more I study science and the more I learn about science, the stronger my faith has always become. So to me, when I hear someone with that opinion, I feel like they just have a lack of imagination and they don't understand science.
Rabbi, where it says as a contact with God, should that be as a contract with God? In the first paragraph?
I thought it was when I went back to the original source, and I think it may be a typo in the source that I have. But again, because the source that I'm using has it as contact, I left it. I should probably change it to that. Because I agree. I think just reading it, it seems to make more sense contract, but where I'm quoting from says contact. It's quite an old volume. It's written, I forgot when, 1976. So
thank you.
Which is, I guess, not that old, but I think you might be right. I wondered that too. Right. So by the way, Lisa, I don't necessarily disagree with you. But the point here I was trying to illustrate is that this is his sorry. So right. Ibn Ezra Ibn Ezra's answer is going to be completely and diametrically different from this. Okay. He's saying that, I mean, let's see if we can, the main point here is, why does it say, normally I don't put the whole thing, but reading through the whole thing is actually quite instructive. Why? So basically he's answering is, I am the Lord your God that took you out of the land of Egypt, and it did not say that I made the heavens and the earth and I made you. That was the question, right? And this was my answer to him. Know that the level of people's faith in which they believe in the glorious God in their hearts is not equal. As the masses believe that which was heard by their ears, and the master told them this. And above them are those who saw it written in the words of the Torah that God gave to Moses. And if a heretic comes to challenge that there is no God, they will place their hands on their mouths and they will not know what to answer. And the one whose heart has elevated him to learn the sciences, which are like stairs to rise upon the place of his desire, will recognize the work of God in the patterns of the plants and the animals and in his own human body. So Lisa, you would agree very much with that, and Saif as well, right? That he will know the function of each limb according to its development and why it is made in such a pattern, and his heart will elevate him afterwards to know that the matters of the planets, that they are the works of God in the intermediate world, that he should know. So all of this, where is that? I am the Lord your God, and this can only be understood by someone who is in an outstanding stage. As I've already explained, where he goes somewhere else, that this God, so he, by the way, so Ibn Ezra, so you understand, he also is of the opinion that I am the Lord your God is not one of the first commandments. It's just a statement. But that's just an aside, okay? But the fact that he is totally, completely disagrees with Yehuda Halevi, even though he's quoting him and then gives his own different answer. It's very interesting. He is saying, no, you'll see the natural phenomena, you'll see all these things, and that will inspire you to believe in God, and you will know. Whereas Halevi is saying, no, it's not like that. Right? So, listen, there's tremendous amounts more I could write about this, and we could talk about it, but I'm curious just in the brief instance of what we've talked about here, what are your reactions? Hannah, Matt, you guys have been very, very quiet lately today. Any thoughts? I don't want to call anybody out, but just curious if you have any thoughts on the matter. I don't want you to feel that you don't have a voice here. You absolutely do. Remember, I keep saying anybody. These classes are designed not just for the very well experienced, but also those who are on a different stage of their journey.
Well, we have a question then.
Sure.
We were debating, do you believe there's 10 commandments or 9?
I believe there are many. So I could have brought that other source. I mean, you understand the way, what I believe is these are 10 utterances that were supposed to form the basis and not the end all, but the basis for the formation of a just and holy society. Okay. And therefore, and the way they are constructed, there's a beauty to the way they are constructed, right? Yes, there were. Yes, that's true, Anna. There were. Here are the 15 commandments. 10 commandments. Yes, I do love that scene. I'm very glad somebody brought that up because that's a fantastic movie. But anyway, anybody know what movie that's from?
History of the World Part 1.
Yeah.
History of the World Part 1. Very good. Right. So it talks about the relations between you and God. And then the second tablet talks about the relation between you and other people. And only together, understanding that relationship you have to maintain between you and others and you and God. And that's why those tablets are there, because it's very easy to understand from just a practical consideration. Yeah, don't murder, don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't all those things. Yeah, but we need more than that. We need to understand why we don't do those things, right? And it's that relationship we have with the Almighty, those first 4 commandments, and potentially the fifth. The fifth is honor your parents. That one is sort of a funny one. Where does that one sit? It's the bridge between the two, right? That the honor or respect is really the fundamental basis for any relationship, whether it be between people or between the Almighty or yourself. You have to have that sense of honor and respect. If you don't have that, then you don't have any healthy relationship with anybody. If you don't have that basis of respect, is one of those interpretations. But the idea is these commandments, the tablets, they are the basis of, not the end of the conversation, the beginning of it. There's also different commentators that look at what each of these 10 commandments represent, or each of these 10 sayings represent. And every single further conversation you have about what the rest of the laws are fall into any one of those 10 categories. Which it's really, really interesting. Really interesting of how that came to be. And how that.
Sorry, Rabbi Kaiserblueth. I missed that. Who came up with the categories?
A couple different people. Ibn Ezra is one of them. He talks about it. Hold on, I have it over here. I'm pretty sure it's Ibn Ezra. Yeah, Ibn Ezra. Actually, is it? Yeah, here. Okay. I actually that's why I put the whole thing here.
Oh, good.
It's all here.
Yes.
By the way, if you check on the website,
yes.
We're putting up the recordings, and we're also matching up. I'm sending the source sheets are going to be there.
Oh, great.
So everything is there. Okay.
Yes.
The recordings and the source sheets are there. Okay. I think they started doing that from earlier this week or last week, but and when we finish tonight or tomorrow morning, I will send to make sure that you can check that. So here we're talking about, he just quoting Sadia Gun, right? Categorize all the commandments in these 10 statements. Found the glorious name of God in the first 5 statements, and I've already explained that the first statement is the foundation and all the structures, blah, 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 right? And he talks about how each one is one of those categories.
Yes.
And for the name of the glorious God is the third one. It is also written is less than idolatry. The fourth statement, God is written. He rests on the 7th day. So all the laws about the holidays there. The fifth statement, the name of God is written. So parents and
So it's a
so you see there also the top of the body.
Yeah.
That was after the violence to the body, steal with money, and so that's just one of them. There's a different person who comes up with it, who writes it. Ramban, he talks about a different way of classifying them, but the same kind of idea that each of these is 10 categories, and every single commandment you have fits into one of those 10 categories.
So
Matt, why are there 10? Sorry, 1 second. So, do I believe there are 10 utterances or commandments or 9? I think it very specifically is 10, but whether they're commandments or utterances, they're categories. I think they're the basis, the foundation for what comes next.
Yes.
Right? It informs us of what comes next.
Yeah.
It's not the end.
No. Yeah. So, but it is a basis, and it is building blocks for the lot, for ethics, for a moral system, and finally really a bit of a rubric for halakha.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's the basis for the halakha, but again, and it's interesting because the rabbis wanted
but
to...
only the beginning, yeah.
No, only the beginning. The rabbis, in essence, they also wanted to de-emphasize a little bit the 10 Commandments. They used to be in the daily prayer service, and they took that out because they didn't want to overemphasize the importance of these 10 and not the other 603, or depending on how you...
Isn't it also because Christianity was emphasizing those? And so the rabbis didn't want Judaism to follow the same path? That was...
Potentially. There's a couple different reasons. Partly, I think, mostly they wanted to de-emphasize the importance of the first 10, because I have this conversation with my bar mitzvah students regularly, right? How many commandments are there? 10. No, there's more than 10, a lot more than 10, right? There's, by many counts, there's thousands, right? Because if you have the 613 in the Torah, but then you look at just the Shulchan Aruch, right? Yeah. Depending on which section you're looking at, you have many, many different commandments, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them.
Actually, there's an infinitude because we have free will.
I have a quick question about the second half of the sentence, which is the... So I find it interesting that the utterance is said in the... God addresses it to the second person singular.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering about how do we then understand that, given that the relationship of being your God seems to be dependent on the clause about having brought you out of the land of Egypt, and then how we understand that on an ongoing basis?
Because we're all supposed to have been standing at Sinai. That's my understanding.
There's that understanding that we are all meant to have, and it's not, right? That's partly why we are, I wasn't there, you weren't there, and, but yet, in a way, we are still bound by that because our ancestors accepted that, so did we. In a decent analogy, it's like, why do I believe that World War II is over? I wasn't there at the signing of the treaty. I wasn't standing on the deck of the Missouri when Japan surrendered. So why do I have to be bound by what my ancestors did? Because that's the way covenants work, right? It's for all time. But it's also that understanding that taking us out of the land of Egypt, that was that formative experience. That is what we always go back to. And one of the commentators were saying, we didn't mention creating the heavens and the earth. We talk about Egypt. That is that data point that we keep going back to.
And it's not even the God of your ancestors at this point.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not at all. Exactly.
I have one more question, but I think we might be out of time.
Go for it.
Can I have one more? Pardon?
Go for it.
So it's about the Amidah and the fourth bracha, which is Da'at, and how that comes after Kedoshim, and kind of, I was just wondering, I was thinking through that as the, as you were talking about Rambam, and whether there's kind of a relevance there around we go from, in the daily prayers, we go from recognizing God's holiness to recognizing, or to being grateful for our intelligence and wisdom and discernment.
Right. So you're talking about the blessing. You graciously, you graciously endow people with wisdom and teach insight to a frail mortal. Endow us graciously from yourself with wisdom, insight, and discernment.
Yes. Yep. That one.
Right. So what's is that a comment or a question?
Oh, it was more just a comment. Sorry, rather than a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that those two sit together within the Amidah. So that
it is fascinating that they put that there, because the wisdom, right? Well, that's because you talk about what is the characteristics that it looks for example, in the Judges, right? That Moses has to appoint Chochmah, Bina, Deya, right? Knowledge, wisdom, and experience. Which, by the way, is where Chabad gets its, because Chabad is an acronym. Chochmah, Bina, Deya, Chabad. So just a FYI there, a little curiosity. All right, guys.
Yes.
Don't forget all the, I don't have the links in front of me, but on tomorrow evening, beginning, I forgot what time, there's the online learning on Saturday nights. Saturday night, there's a Masorti Tikkun Motzei Shavuot. We're partnering with Kilat Nitzan in Melbourne. That'll be online as well. You can register, check our Facebook page, check the website. We'll be posting that details as well. That'll be me and Rabbi Yonatan Sadov and a couple people on a panel. That's at 7 o'clock on Saturday night. We'll only go for about an hour and a half max. All right?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy. Have a
Thanks,
great
everyone.
Chag Sameach. Happy
Chag
Cheesecake.
Sameach.
Sameach.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Whoops.